This man has played everyone from female soul singer. Yeah. Yeah, he's large. He's large, which means he's extremely famous. To a chimpanzee, to Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah, are you all big fans? Gosh. From Quantum Leap, Scott Bakula.
The story of Quantum Leap begins more than 40 years ago. It's the 1950s, and everyone's jazzed about hula hoops and rock and roll. But in Cokeburg, Pennsylvania, everyone's jazzed about coal. So what does a coal mining town have to do with Quantum Leap? Simple. This is where Quantum Leap creator Don Belisario grows up and sees how history affects the lives of ordinary people. It's these types of people who later appear in Quantum Leap.
I recreated people from the town. I had actors portray them. I told them how their accents were, how they spoke, what they did, and they were portraying the people that I remembered.
But that happens much later. Don may have been inspired, but he wasn't about to dig coal for the rest of his life. So he joins the Marines, where in 1959, he meets Lee Harvey Oswald.
I was in the Marine Corps with Lee Harvey Oswald and had met him and had some words with him.
Now, Belisario is no psychic, so he could not have known that Oswald would assassinate Kennedy 5 years later. But what if he could have known? Would he have been able to put right what Oswald did wrong? Sound familiar? This is the theme of Quantum Leap. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. After the military, Don goes on to a successful career in advertising when, at the age of 41, he quits his job and heads to Hollywood. He soon finds work writing for TV shows like Baa, Black Sheep, and Battlestar Galactica. But it's not until 1980 that Don hits gold when he creates Magnum P.I. It is on this show that Don meets dancer-turned-actress Deborah Pratt. And as the story often goes in Hollywood, the actress marries the producer. Don is happy. Deborah is happy. Magnum is a hit, and the kid from Cokeburg has earned Hollywood's respect.
Don, was one of the big guys. So that when Don puts a show on the air, you don't have the minions out there saying, well, you have to change this, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, because Don is Don.
So now it's the late 80s, Magnum's coming to an end, and a series of films called Back to the Future has everyone talking about time travel. Don Belisario may not have had a flux capacitor, but he was considering doing some time travel of his own.
I was reading a book called Coming of Age in the Milky Way, which explained man's search for answers in the universe. Explained about Einstein's theory of relativity, dealt a little bit with the possibility of time travel, and it also talked about a quantum leap.
Einstein talked about the fact that time and space is limited.
That means that you can't get into any space unless you went into somebody and into their life.
Cool idea. But how do you turn this into a TV show?
I could have a character leaping through time. He could be going from one situation to another every week.
It kind of evolved into this interesting concept of what would you do when you got there?
In every time travel show you see, oh, if we change history, you'll kill your own grandfather, you'll never be born. That's not true. We can go back and we can change anything we want in the past, as long as what we change isn't in and of itself general knowledge.
So Don begins working on a concept for a time travel show. Maybe not the best choice, since past time travel shows like Time Tunnel and Voyagers were canceled after only one season. But Belisario wasn't about to let that stand in his way. He created 5 rules that would allow his time traveler Sam and his guide Al to avoid the pitfalls from time travel shows of the past. Rule number 1, limit the time travel.
I thought, I don't want to go back into the past too far, because to do that, the suspense of belief becomes too much with a sophisticated audience today. You know, you have him walking around in Rome with Julius Caesar, doesn't work. And that's when I came up with the idea of limiting his ability to travel in time to his own lifespan.
Rule number 2, give the time traveler an invisible link to the present.
Al was a hologram, therefore Al could not interact with anyone in any of the stories. He could only be seen and heard by Sam.
Rule number 3, put the time traveler in someone else's body.
While we saw him as Sam Beckett, everyone else saw him as the person he leaped into. And the only time he saw himself as he looked to everyone else was when he looked in a mirror.
Rule number 4, give the time traveler a purpose.
He could only leap again when he had put right what once went wrong. And so he was always seeking what that was.
And rule number 5, Sam cannot leap into anyone famous. So we've got a guy who time travels through his own lifetime, talks to someone who isn't really there, can only see how others see him when he looks in a mirror, and can't leave until he fixes something that went wrong. Try explaining that to the big boys at NBC, Chairman Brandon Tartikoff and President Warren Littlefield.
I remember when Don Belisario actually came into NBC and pitched us this strange idea. And I think our first response was, huh? And he said, no, let me take you through this slowly. It's a little more complex than a buddy comedy. I want you to just give me your imagination. I'm going to take you on an adventure. And it's called Quantum Leap.
Brandon had me explain it to him, and then he said, explain it to me again so my mother will understand it. And I explained it to him again. He still didn't understand it.
Whose brainchild is this, yours?
Come on, guys. It's not that tough. Let's try again.
It was sort of an anthology without being an anthology.
I always considered it a drama.
It was science fiction.
I never considered Quantum Leap a sci-fi show.
I don't think I've ever successfully explained the show to anybody.
Okay, so maybe it is a bit confusing, but before Don left the meeting, he sold the concept. All Belisario needed now was to cast the 2 lead roles. First, he needed Dr. Sam Beckett, the brilliant, sensitive do-gooder stuck in the past. Before gracing the pages of Playgirl magazine, Scott Bakula was just a theater guy from New York trying to break into television. He finally got his chance.
All this sweet stuff's really getting to us, ma'am.
It was right around the time when Michael Jackson was doing all of his triangle choreography. I was the lead guy, dancing and singing my way through the madness.
Scott was looking to do a little more than sing and dance. But Hollywood was a tough place, and Bakula had already been part of 2 TV flops, Gung Ho and Eisenhower and Lutz. His luck was about to change when he was called in to read for the part of Sam Beckett. Scott's life mirrored Sam's. Both grew up in a small town, had conservative upbringings, played sports, and loved music. They even have the same initials. It was like Sam Beckett leaped into Scott Bakula's body.
It was very easy to kind of transfer some of my own Midwestern ideals and certainly understand where Sam Beckett came from in terms of farm country, because my grandmother's family were farm people, middle Missouri. You know, I understood that kind of stock, that country stock, and that kind of loyalty and deep commitment to not only to each other but to the land.
Bakula was a perfect fit, and Belisario knew it.
As soon as the door closed, I said, get him, don't let him get away. I didn't want to show my enthusiasm and have the price go up, you know. So I said, get him, because he is Sam Beckett.
Scott was in. Now Belisario needed to cast Al, Sam Beckett's womanizing, sex-charged sidekick, stuck in the present. Dean Stockwell is a screen legend who's been acting since he was a kid. But becoming a legend isn't always easy. Dean takes a break from acting in the 1960s to hang out with Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper. But when he comes back to work, no one is hiring.
I had a stretch from about 1965 until 1980 where I couldn't get arrested. I was able to get work doing dinner theater around the country, which is for washed up people that have a name value. And it was very embarrassing. Finally got to a point where I was not only about ready, I was giving up the business.
It was time for Dean to say goodbye, so he packed up the car and placed a farewell ad in Variety. And that's when the phone started ringing. By 1988, Dean was back. Blue Velvet was a hit, and Married to the Mob earned him an Oscar nomination. But Dean was looking for a place he could stay a while. He wanted a TV series.
When Dean and Scott got together, there was just a spark of chemistry between them. And you knew the moment you saw them, that's them, that's them.
The recipe was complete. There was nothing left to do but yell action.
We're in good shape. He has no lines in this scene.
We're rolling.
Speeding.
And action.
On March 26, 1989, Quantum Leap debuted on NBC. The world was introduced to Mr. Sensitive, Mr. Libido.
Come on, she's probably all of 17.
Well, she looks like she skipped a couple of grades. In fact, I think she's ready for graduate school.
And a time travel experiment gone haywire.
I mean, just the very idea that, someone could leap into other people's bodies was something we'd never seen before.
I was spending the weekend at a friend's house, and a bunch of us watched the pilot, and at the end we literally burst into applause. We loved it so much and we couldn't wait for the next episode.
It kind of expanded the boundaries of what the mainstream would consider traditional sci-fi, because prior to that, the last 10, 15 years before, it was pretty much Star Trek Next Generation, or nothing. And this kind of opened up kind of the interpretation, the definition of what qualified as a sci-fi show in prime time.
Quantum Leap is on its way. Over 23 million people see the pilot. Despite its success, NBC moves the show 2 times. By the 5th episode, the audience has been cut in half. But NBC isn't looking for excuses, and Quantum Leap's great start may end up being its downfall.